In this series, I'll be visiting some of our most outstanding countryside as I explore it using fieldcraft in the hope of seeing some of our rarest and most inspiring wildlife. This week I've come to Somerset to explore the quintessential British habitat, the hay meadow. Today, they're incredibly rare, but they provide an important haven for some of our most cherished wildlife, from the humble bumblebee to the majestic barn owl. When I think of an English summer, I have one environment in mind. It's this, a Somerset hay meadow. And what's more, it's an incredible place to look for British wildlife. This wonderful habitat has been part of our landscape for centuries. Strictly speaking, the term meadow is used to describe grass fields that are grown for hay. But whether grown for hay or grazed, these permanent, undisturbed pastures are managed in traditional ways. Cattle are used instead of modern farm machinery, and a lack of herbicides encourages a diverse and colourful mix of wild flowers and grasses. Scythed in late summer, the flowers and grasses are able to mature and set seed, providing cover and food for a host of insects, and in turn the creatures that feed on them. I've come to Somerset in the southwest of England, where nearly half of Britain's hay meadows and unimproved grassland can be found in glorious Technicolor. My first stop is Chancellor's Farm. This nature reserve is a true botanist's paradise, with a wealth of colourful wildflowers like this beautiful betony. Names such as ox-eyed daisy, lady's bedstraw, meadow vetchling sound like something straight out of a Thomas Hardy novel. Oh, listen to this. This plant rattles. It's called yellow rattle. Really well named. This here, that's meadow sweet. It's one of my favourite plants. You can see there the flowers always remind me of the bubbles coming out of a champagne bottle. They're so fine and full of sparkle. And that's an important medicinal plant. Over here there's red clover. And red clover is very interesting because it has this ability to fix nitrogen in the soil, and farmers are increasingly turning to clover to help to improve the condition of their fields. That's just 3 of perhaps 200 flowers that you could find in a meadow like this. But of course the flowers are only half of the story. Listen to that sound. This meadow is filled with insect life, and they're a vital part of the story of the plants too, particularly bees, with their role in pollination of the different flowers. To find out more about them, I'm going to meet a lady who's a real bee expert. Dr. Pippa Rayner has spent 7 years studying wildlife meadows to help conserve them. Hey Pippa, how are you getting on?
I'm getting on very well, thank you, yeah. Fantastic day for it.
Isn't it? It's a lovely meadow.
Absolutely gorgeous, and it's full of all the different plants that bumblebees love, with the red clovers and the eyebright and knapweed. It's just a bumblebee paradise, really.
The eyebright's beautiful here.
It's one of my favourites.
Tell me about the relationship then between bees and flowers.
Essentially, it couldn't be more mutualistic. I mean, if you think about bumblebees, they collect pollen, they collect nectar, so they desperately need lots of flowery places with pollen and nectar-rich plants, just like the ones we've got here. But on the other side of it, those very plants themselves need pollination. So the bumblebee, as it's bumbling from flower to flower, is doing a really important job, making sure that each plant is pollinated.
But they've evolved together, haven't they?
Absolutely, and so, but what of course has happened now is that with less flowers, we've started to see less bees because of that fact that they've got that very mutual relationship.
But that's really true. I mean, since I was a child, I see far fewer bees in the countryside.
Yeah, I mean, we see them actually more in our gardens these days than we do in the countryside, and that's because they've been forced into places with the remaining flowers. And so our gardens are very important for bumblebees, but actually if we're going to keep and look after them and keep supporting the pollination that they provide, we actually need much more areas just like this out in our countryside.
So what have you found in the field today?
Oh, well, I've seen quite a few species already, but I've seen mainly common species, things like the buff-tailed bumblebee, which people see in their gardens, garden bumblebee, which is a fantastic, quite a large bumblebee with really, really long tongue, shockingly long. It's quite fantastic, quite a spectacle. And also lots of red-tailed bumblebees, which have this very characteristic, as you might imagine, little red bottom. Very distinctive, and once people sort of often think a bumblebee, you know, are there different kinds, but once you start looking at them, you realise there are several species, and you can start to spot them on your own.
Here we go, on the clover.
I'll see if I can put it in a pot for you, if you like,
Yeah,
so that we
good.
can have a good look at it. Aha! So our first bumblebee.
What have we got here?
Well, the interesting thing you can straight away see is that it's got pollen in its pollen basket. So on each side of its legs, what it does when it visits the flower, it goes up and it collects pollen, and it sort of brushes it off its fluff, because the fluff's all there to help collect the pollen. And then it puts it on its legs, and it's got these sort of shiny areas with long hairs each side where it sticks it, and that manages to basically retain it until it gets back to the nest, and then it kicks off these big lumps and then goes back out looking for more pollen. And you can see there it's a lovely bumblebee with a very bright red tail, which very quickly tells me that it's a red-tailed bumblebee.
So we're going to release her?
Yes, I think she'll start to heat up if we don't do it soon, so let's see if we can put her down on a flower. There we go.
That's lovely. Of course, bumblebees don't have the big nests that we associate with a honeybee.
Well, I mean, in a honeybee hive, you might have up to 40,000 bees. Bumblebees do it on a slightly smaller scale, but they might have up to 200, maybe even 400 workers in a nest. But some of our rarer species, you know, we've got 24 species in the UK, and some of them actually nest on a much smaller scale, maybe just 30 workers per nest. But they'll still go out and about, bumbling around, looking for flowers within about a kilometre of where they live.
And some of them make their nests underneath rotting logs and things like that.
Well, you get some that sort of are pocket makers, and what they do is they weave little bits of moss and dried grass, and they weave a little pocket, and you do sometimes find just in the bottom of tussocky grass a little, looks a bit like a miniature bird's nest. But others use the sort of old mouse and vole holes. They sort of sense them out by smell, and they nest slightly underground, and again they'll take in the dead grass that way.
I think you got it.
Oh, I think I have. Can you hear them buzzing away?
Yeah. They're not aggressive like some bees.
Oh, no. They'll only sting if they think they're absolutely going to die. So, I haven't been stung yet. Right then.
Is that a whitetail?
Yeah, you can't sort of jump straight in with the ones with the white tails, purely because there is the 3 species of bumblebee that we have that each have a white tail.
Yeah.
The key thing to look for is whether it has a yellow stripe at the bottom of the thorax. The thorax is like the first blobby bit. You can see there's a yellow stripe at the top, but there isn't one at the bottom of the thorax. If there was, that would make it a garden bumblebee.
Yeah.
But as it hasn't got that, it's either a white-tailed bumblebee or a buff-tailed. And because she's got a slightly buff tail and mucky yellow stripes, I'd say she's definitely a buff-tail. And again, you can see her pollen basket. She's been collecting something different, because that's quite a pale yellow there.
It's a different colour, isn't it? Yes.
So our red tail had a different kind of pollen on it. You can see she's been very busy away, working from flower to flower. So now it's lovely to see her so busy.
The buzz of insects and the rustle of warm air in the long grass is for me the sound of an English summer, with one important addition.
I've come out into the hay meadow to hear the sound of high summer in Britain, the song of the skylark.
This virtuoso performance is part of the skylark's territorial display. It sounds its distinctive call as it climbs to the zenith of its flight, then slowly descends.
They only normally sing for a couple of minutes, but I've been told that one was once recorded singing for an hour. That's quite a feat of endurance. That sound is like liquid sunshine, isn't it?
This wonderful farmland bird has seen its population halve in the last quarter of a century, but in places like this, where meadows are being traditionally managed, the skies are once again filled with their song.
Not just the sound of summer, but I guess to me it's become a more important sound. It's the sound of the success of organic farming, because as farmers have increasingly turned to more organic methods, skylarks have returned to meadows where their song had been absent for several generations. In fact, I remember talking to a farmer who'd gone back to organic farming, and he said, this year, for the first time since I was a small boy, we heard the sound of skylarks. And that's really interesting, because he'd actually forgotten that as a boy he could hear skylarks. And that's so often the case, that when something disappears from nature, we don't notice its disappearance. It just passes from memory.
Even a small hay meadow is home to literally hundreds of wildlife species. It's vital that every part of this delicate ecosystem is healthy in order for the creatures at the top of the food chain to thrive. I'm in Somerset, exploring one of our most precious wildlife habitats, the hay meadow. Here, in the Mendip Hills, you can find areas reminiscent of the countryside we used to have. The small grassland pastures are edged by ancient hedgerows, old stone walls and woodland, providing a vital home to some of our rarest plants and creatures that spill into the meadows in search of food. I've come to Yarley Fields. This area of unimproved grassland is surrounded by old deciduous trees, the ideal nesting site for woodpeckers. The great spotted woodpecker is actually the most common of the 3 woodpeckers found in Britain. In high summer, you can hear it rapidly drumming its bill against a branch, a way of defending its territory. But I've come to this spot hoping to see its slightly larger but equally colourful cousin, the green woodpecker.
The secret to finding almost any species in the wild is finding the right habitat. Green woodpeckers need trees because they need nesting sites, and they need abundant insects, and particularly they like these ant hills. So if you see a field like this, you know that's a good place to look for the green woodpecker.
These ant hills are large, fragile mounds housing thousands of yellow ants. Habitats like these are easily destroyed by ploughing, so are a precious feature of undisturbed grassland.
Just going to sit quiet now and watch. I'm looking now for the distinctive undulating flight of the woodpecker. There's a green woodpecker. Juvenile green woodpecker. Busy collecting ants, I think. The youngsters don't have all the bright colours of the adults. They're much better camouflaged, which suits them when they're at this naive, exploratory stage in their life. Just gone across. And up. You see, go up into the tree now? I've lost him in the vegetation for the moment. There he is. He's having a good preen. You see how mottled their feathers are. These juveniles have this wonderful camouflage. And it really does blend perfectly with the lichen you see on the ash tree there. They're less brightly coloured than the adults. More speckledy. Amazing how they can hang on like that. Perfectly adapted for life on the side of a tree. Here comes the parent bird. Here comes the parent bird. It's the male. The male's coming up from below. You can see, they've gone down. But that's the male bird that's come back to feed this chick. And now the young bird is coming down, backing down the trunk. But they've gone down the other side of the tree. I think that bird knows we're here. They're very clever. The male has gone right, the adult male has gone right to the top of the tree, and I think to have a break from feeding, and the chick's gingerly picking its way back up. I think the dad wants a little break. There goes the male bird. Busy collecting ants, I think.
The green woodpecker eats up to 2,000 ants a day, using its long, sticky tongue to probe into the anthills. That's the adult bird. And you can see the ants that's responding. Do you see that? That's responded to that call. I'm coming back soon. Chick's gone back into waiting mode. I love these woodpeckers. They have almost a maniacal glare in their eye. Watching wildlife like this is really important, and I think getting children to see wildlife in this way, with your own eyes, is really important. Watching the bird has reminded me of that. The first time I encountered a green woodpecker as a child was as a child when I found a dead one, and I didn't know what the bird was, but I remember being absolutely blown away by the colours of the feathers. Fantastic. You know, in North America, one of the Sioux nations had, there's a very famous saying. They said that man's heart away from nature grows hard, and because of that they would keep their youth close to its softening influence. And I think there's great wisdom in that. The green woodpecker's the yaffle of the countryside. It's the bird that laughs at you when you're out. It always makes me chuckle, because it's almost like they're poking fun at us. Of course they're not laughing, but that's what it sounds like. Look at those silly human beings. This rural idyll is actually a complex and delicate ecosystem, and one we're in danger of losing. Hay meadows like these are a throwback to the way we once used to farm, in a time when quality was perhaps more important than quantity. Since the Second World War, farming practices have changed immensely. Intense farming and the use of herbicides destroy many of the wildflowers and grasses that provide vital food and shelter for meadow wildlife. An incredible 97% of the meadows that were here in the 1940s have now been lost. But here at Chancellor's Farm, the meadows are traditionally managed. Kate Lawrence from the Somerset Wildlife Trust has been running the farm for 30 years and is in charge of a carefully planned grazing regime.
And what do you have to do to manage this?
We cut the hay after mid-July normally, when most of the species have set seed back into the meadows. We then bale into small bales and we feed that hay back to the cattle throughout the winter on these meadows. So putting back everything that we've taken off with the herbs in the hay, we can only imagine that that is a good healthy diet for them. They do seem to thrive on it.
I mean, it looks healthy when you look at it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It's incredibly diverse.
The grazing cattle control the growth of the coarse grass and scrub. At the same time, they help to disperse the seeds of wild flowers as they move from field to field. Literally thousands of insects and invertebrates rely on the sheer diversity of flora for survival. One grass is definitely not the same as another from a caterpillar's point of view.
This is a really glorious meadow.
Matthew Oates from the National Trust is an expert on one particular creature that relies heavily on this rare habitat.
We have meadow browns, which is, as it sounds, a common grassland meadowland butterfly, and one or two small tortoiseshells, which is a very common garden butterfly whose caterpillars feed on nettles. And the large skipper, which is a small fiery orange dart that behaves rather like a Harrier jump jet. They are seriously fast flying. when they take off. The others will take off.
Especially on a day like this, which is so warm.
Yeah.
The butterflies are very active, aren't they?
Yeah, so they can become hyperactive on a day like this.
Why is the temperature so important to their speed of movement?
Yeah, it's quite simple. Their bodies have to be warm enough to actually enable them to fly. So on cooler or cloudier days, they actually spend a lot of time just basking, warming up. It's not the wings they're warming up, but the actual body, and the wings will funnel heat down onto the body. But in really hot weather like this, many of them actually have the opposite problem. It gets too hot for them. They have to go and sit in a cool leafy spray somewhere and just calm down.
That's right. And I think a lot of people will, when they think about butterflies and being involved with them, will be thinking about maybe buddleia bushes and flowers to help the mature butterfly, but they spend most of their life in a different form.
Yeah, most of our butterflies live for about a week. A few live much longer. But what's critical is this incredible metamorphosis they go through from egg, caterpillar, pupa or chrysalis, and then the final bit of butterfly. So they spent most of their true life without wings.
So what do you need in terms of habitat at that stage?
Their caterpillars eat certain grasses, not modern mainstream commercial agricultural grasses, but these old native species which have become generally rather scarce.
This is exactly what we've got in this meadow.
Yeah, so when I talk about a grass-feeding butterfly, I'm really talking about a grass-feeding caterpillar of a butterfly. Okay, it's crucial.
So when we look around here, basically what we're seeing is what we've lost.
Absolutely. Every time I come into a meadow like this, I just think this is what we communally have lost.
Personally, I think one of the joys of butterflies is that they are a perfect way into natural history if you're just starting out.
They are not too hard to learn in this country. In other European countries they are difficult, but here we've only really got 59 resident types of butterfly, plus a few others that come in as migrants, rare migrants really. So they're not too difficult. They are a beginner's group, as we call them. And one of the joys of butterflies is they take you to the most fantastic, wonderful, beautiful places at the optimum time of year for that place, for the spirit of that place.
I've come to Somerset to explore one of our most precious wild habitats, the British Hay Meadow, with its wealth of diverse and beautiful flowers and grasses. Even a morning shower hasn't dampened the appetite of this group of goldfinches. They flocked here to feast on the rich supply of unripened seeds in the meadow herbage. In the air, another group of hungry opportunists circle overhead.
Well, it's the way of things, isn't it? The hay meadow is rich in insects, and because of that it brings other wildlife, like these house martins. They've traditionally found secure nest sites under the eaves of farmhouses, so much so that we just call them house martins. And here you can see the nests that they've built with beakfuls of mud. They've carefully plastered these little scalloped nests on the side of the building there, and that's where they'll raise their young before flying back to Africa at the end of the summer.
Adult house martins catch insects on the wing before swooping back to feed their hungry chicks. In my mind, the house martin's nest is something to treasure. It can take them up to 18 days to build one. I'm not sure I'd fancy the task after a long flight from Africa. Hopefully this nest will still be here next summer when they return. Swallows easily match their cousins' agility. They tend to fly lower over the ground as they hoover up insects mid-flight to treat their chicks to an alfresco lunch.
They're great fun to watch. If you try to keep your eye on one of them and just follow it, it makes you dizzy. They're such good acrobats.
I firmly believe that if we live our lives in the right way, we create opportunities for other wildlife, and they enrich our experience of life by their presence. To live in a world devoid of wildlife because we've tidied everything up and made everything hostile to wildlife has got to be unhealthy. For creatures higher up the food chain, the meadow's rich bounty is an irresistible lure. This badger has ventured out in the day to feast on insects and earthworms. Despite its name, this slow worm isn't a worm or even a snake. It is in fact a legless lizard who, like the common lizard, is looking to lunch on small insects or maybe a slug or spider. This ecosystem is perhaps the clearest example of how a habitat and the creatures that live there rely upon each other to thrive. Rabbits graze on grass, preventing shrubs from dominating the wildflowers, while overhead a hungry buzzard circles looking for prey. These rotund dung beetles provide a valuable service by breaking down the continuous supply of dung, which helps to recycle nutrients back into the soil. Cowpats also offer the perfect warm, moist and food-rich environment for beetles to bury into and lay their eggs. Ecologist Adrian Coward monitors the area's population of small rodents that play a key role in this ecosystem. He's put out some traps to try to catch one of these elusive creatures. Large animals are always dependent upon their prey species, aren't they? And
certainly.
These meadows are particularly rich in small mammals.
Yes. Things like kestrels and barn owls, at certain times of the year, this is basically their only food item almost. It's sort of almost nothing else but small voles.
And you're involved in surveying the small mammals.
Yeah.
And how do you go about that?
Well, we normally use longworth traps, which are totally safe for animals. You know, these sort of mammals. They're small aluminium boxes with a little trap door on them. So the mouse goes in, or the vole goes in, or the shrew goes in, and the door shuts behind it. And we put food inside, suitable for both herbivores and insectivores, meat and dry food, so that it's got plenty of food to keep it in content while we get around to trapping them, checking them all.
Fantastic. Well, let's have a look at some.
Okay. What we normally do when we get to a trap that's closed, we normally put the whole thing into a big plastic bag.
Yeah.
Because they have a habit of being very quick, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
Has it gone off?
Yeah.
You can see the tube where it goes in,
yep.
in the box. And you can see the door shut on there.
Yep.
So the idea is to get the whole thing into the plastic bag. This tube's clear, make sure there's nothing in there.
You can see how this works. When it passes over that little bar, it should drop like that.
We have a mouse in here. Looks like a wood mouse. You can have a little look at it.
Look at that.
You can see the typical mouse. Nice long tail on it. And the coloration underneath. We do get, you just bit me. Yeah. We do get yellow neck occasionally. Yeah. And they do have quite a distinct yellow sort of Y on their chest. And we normally weigh them. And this is a little bit undignified. I've got a pair of scales there. And I know this bag weighs 1.5 grams. So you can let's see what that is, and you can tell me how much it weighs.
There you go.
Well, you can see it's about 27 grams, which means that it's 25.5.
Yep.
So that's quite a good weight for a wood mouse. Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. When you see the size of her head is the same size as an acorn.
That's right.
And I've come across stashes of acorns that these were put away that
certainly
are in the hundreds.
Yeah. And you find them sometimes where it's just full of food.
Yeah.
And very little bedding. You know, at certain times of the year. But they're very dependent on the right sort of food source being available to them. In a woodland situation, for example, if you get a bad year for a beech mass, that sort of thing, and then the population declines immediately.
Right.
And the same is with the animals that eat these, things like barn owls. And if you get a sort of problem with these reproducing, it hits straight on to the barn owls. It's a very quick reaction.
Shall we let her go? I think we'll release her back into the
Let her
wild.
go back over into her habitat, and off you go.
There you go. It's amazing how fast they are.
Yeah, it's just very quick. Okay, we've got one more over there ready to check now if we can.
Okay, let's go and have a look at that. What food do you put in them?
Normally hamster food and a bit of cat food, dog food before, you know, with the potential for catching shrews. And we need to make sure they've got some meat inside because they're insectivores.
Yeah, this one's shut.
Well done, Ray.
So I'll pass this out to you.
Okay, we'll get the bag ready. Do you want to have a go at this one?
Oh, sure. Well, I can do. But you do it, it's fine. I think it's very important to handle animals correctly. I don't like it when people
pick animals up on television and prod them and poke them just for the sake of the camera.
That's very important.
Very anti that, and you're the professional here, so I'm going to leave it in your hands.
Well, I'm afraid it's another wood mouse.
No, it's wood mouse season.
It is.
There we go. Of course, here you can see they have 5 toes in the rear foot and 4 in the front feet. You can see that.
Okay, should we weigh her?
Yeah, let's weigh her. Oh gosh, this one's a heavy one. She is 28 grams.
28. That's 2.5 grams bigger than the last one.
Yeah.
Heavier than the last one.
But she does look a little bigger, actually, doesn't she?
Yeah, maybe she has got some young ones due. I mean, they could be well breeding this time of the year. They breed through most of the summer months, sort of March till October, generally. And they'll have also a number of litters. But let her go now.
Yeah, do.
Okay, let her go.
Yes.
Pop her back. There she goes.
Gone.
Gone. It's like a rocket.
Amazing how fast they can leap. How far they leap.
Yeah.
Unlike ploughed or cultivated fields, unimproved meadows like these have an abundance of the rough tussocky grass that wood mice and field voles need to shelter and to breed. And it goes without saying that any habitat with a healthy population of prey attracts its fair share of predators. So it's here I have the best chance of watching one of the country's most magical and dearly loved birds, the barn owl. This elusive bird of prey can be recognised by its white, heart-shaped face, which acts in a similar way to our ears by directing sounds to its inner ears. Even in the deep vegetation of this meadow, the rustle or squeak of a vole is a dead giveaway. It's time for some forensic work. Owls swallow their prey whole, largely, and they digest it in their stomach, but there are some parts they can't digest, and those they regurgitate as a pellet. And that can tell us a lot about what they're eating, because inside here there will be the remains of their meals. You can see, as soon as I pull it apart, bones starting to appear from amongst the remains of fur, perhaps even feather. Not only can it tell us what the bird has been eating, but of course it gives us an idea of what small mammals are to be found in close proximity to the nest or roosting site. So if I start to pull some of these little bones out, you see it's quite a macabre business. The skull. The remains of the owl's victims. It's amazing what's in here. The remains of a couple of beaks, maybe some young birds. I think this owl's been busy. You can look up the bones that you find in field guides and work out which animals it's been eating. And all you really need to do that with is a hand lens. But the best way is with a microscope like this. Here I've got a field vole. Rodents. Another vole. This is another rodent. So, in this pellet, all of the skulls are rodents, and 3, possibly 4 field voles. So it gives you some idea of how important voles are in an owl's diet. I broke another pellet up a little earlier, and in here there's the beak from a small bird. You see, quite a diverse diet, but mostly voles. So there are no surprises there, but it reinforces the importance of meadows and rough pastures for these fantastic birds. You have to have the habitat that suits their prey. All predators are absolutely dependent upon their prey species. I've been exploring the meadows of Somerset. These old features of the British countryside are sadly now a rare sight in our landscape. But where they are being carefully managed and preserved, these precious habitats are home to literally hundreds of plants and animal species. The hay meadow is in its prime on a warm summer's day, but I've come out in the early evening when I'm most likely to catch a glimpse of a barn owl hunting for voles. As I make my way to Chancellor's farm, something catches my eye. A small roe deer is almost completely hidden by the long grass.
That is a real beautiful sight of the summer, which is only 50 metres away. And of course, if she can hear me, she's got her eye on us. What I'm going to do is ask the cameraman to see if he can get any closer to get some shots. And I'm going to stay back because she's just way too alert for all of us.
This doe will have her young nearby, so she's incredibly wary.
I love it when I'm in the woods. I find the first new deer tracks of the season. That's always a very exciting moment to see the new life of the forest. Wonderful.
That's made my evening. But I've got one more treat. Like house martins, barn owls tend to nest in man-made structures near to open countryside where there's a good supply of food.
I spotted a barn owl hunting down and across the field over there, but she was just there for fleeting moments before moving off in this direction. And there's this old farm building here. It could be that this is where the nest is. Barn owls absolutely love old buildings, but they have to be quiet. They're very sensitive to sound. They don't like too much disturbance.
I'm going to go down here and use these trees as cover. It'll give me a chance to look back at the building.
Always come into cover. Barn owls suffered a massive decline in the 1980s, I think largely due to loss of habitat. Old trees are really important. Hollows in trees, that's their natural nest site. And all too often we cut down old trees because we think, oh, they're a danger, they're a threat. Old trees are fantastic, not just as a habitat for owls, but for bats and other birds and insects. They provide a fantastic food source. And you know, I think it's good for humans too to have a few grandfather trees that are out there to remind us just how short our lifespan is.
Pheasant going on to roost. Here we go. Fantastic. It's there. Came back with a big foal. Wonderful. What a privilege to see that. These are the most beautiful birds. I can hear the chicks in the nest inside. Hungry mouths in there. This year is supposed to be a very good year for voles. But barn owls don't like hard winters, and we've just had a very hard winter. They do start to breed sometimes very early, February, March. So it could be that they've lost a brood and are on a second brood at this moment.
It's taking its time. At this time of year, I'd expect to see the birds going every couple of minutes, taking it in turns to feed their chicks. It'd be interesting to see whether it's the same bird that comes out. If we only see one bird, it could be that the hen is sitting on eggs. If we see the two birds, then it's likely to have chicks, because they take it in turns to feed them.
Here we go. He's having a look out now.
They're very wary when they're close to the nest site. Stop, have a look, have a good listen to see what's going on. You have to remember, owls have got phenomenal hearing. They fly quite low over the meadow, quartering it, going backwards and forwards, listening like that. Their hearing apparatus is offset so that they can get a very good range location, accurate location of what they're looking for. When they find something, they often do this little turn around, almost fluttering like a moth before they pounce.
They're up with a vole. It's great to watch.
Not good if you're a vole though.
The barn owl's large wings and light body enable them to fly slowly without stalling, giving them ample time to pinpoint their prey on the ground below. In mid-air, this one performs an amazingly smooth feat, grabbing the vole with its long talons mid-flight. Just wonderful to see.
Another bird's gone out. Both birds have left. And it's gone out to the left because it can hear me talking. It didn't come straight out. They make a really shrill sound. They've got a very distinctive call. A lot of people hear it and are terrified. There are quite a few different things that make sounds in the woods at night that can scare people if you don't know what they are. Fantastic. I never tire of that, but they are just amazing. If ever there was a reason to still have hay meadows and rough pasture, it has to be the barn owl.